Hey everyone, before we get started with episode 42 of FECast, Stormblessed is good and Suny is terrible, a few plugs. First of all, if you're not already a part of the Friends of Eternal Discord, it is the best place on the internet to get better at Eternal. We have people talking about Eternal all the time, sharing their tech before tournaments and whatnot. Link is in the description. FECast would not be possible without the generous support of our patrons at patreon.com. If you'd like to be like these lovely people and help support the show and get a shout out, and if you have a high enough tier, you get to hang out in the VIP lounge of the FE Discord, you can go to patreon.com/Frozen of Eternal and consider donating. So thanks a ton to Cotillion, Ryder, Alcide Bava, Sigma Tank, Work Done Sun, Chamomilk, Chrissy, D-Dub, and Ustat for their continued support of FECast. This podcast would not be possible without them. Without any further ado, let's hear about why Stormblessed is good and why I am terrible in episode 42 of FECast. Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 42 of FECast. Stormblessed is good and Suny is terrible. Today, we're going to be talking about what the scheduled events coming up are. The draft event that happened last week, that was a lot of fun. The impact of Awakening cards, and we'll be discussing wildcards. It's a very, very hot day. I don't know about you, Stormblessed, but I've had 3 days in a row of 100+ degree heat, and I do not have air conditioning, but I am hanging in there. How are you doing, Stormblessed?
Yeah, it is also very, very hot where I am as well. And I've got a fan going in the background, and I'm taking off my shirt. Ooh, spicy! But it's so hot that like no one can see anything. Yeah, so it's just ridiculously hot.
Yeah, it is rough. But Awakening's been out for almost a week now, and I've been having a lot of fun with it. Have you been having a lot of fun with it?
I have been having a lot of fun with it. Probably less than a lot of people because I'm still focused on draft. Although we'll get to that in a second.
All right, so let's talk about some of the stuff that's going to be coming up. We got dates for our summer championships. The Throne Championship is going to be a week and a half from this recording on September 19th, and the Expedition Championship is going to be on September 26th. Again, I think you just need to... What's the qualification? It's 25 points, right?
25 points for an in, 75 points for the 3-win buys on both formats.
Yeah. I think it's going to be 15 games. You probably need a 10-5 record or better, maybe 11-4 in order to qualify for day 2.
10-5 is probably going to be on the cusp with what was last time? Was last time did 9-6 get in? Was it just 10-5s? I think it was just 10-5s. We're on the tiebreaker cusp, and 11-4 was on the guaranteed in.
I don't remember. It's hard to keep track of all these things.
Sure. You get expedition card back points. You can, for the expedition one, you can possibly finish out your card back if you haven't done that yet, which is always exciting because you got to get the shiny card back.
It is pretty cool, although I'm never leaving my closed beta card back. Keeping that
neither am I. I have to swag on the people that know what it means.
Yeah, but you gotta collect them all, right? You gotta get all the amazing card backs that you can without having to go overboard. Anyway, so good luck to everyone playing in those championships. Next week we'll definitely be talking about Throne a whole lot more, getting you up to speed to that, but I'd say that the metagame is still developing for Throne. I don't think we have a clear shot of what's going to show up at the tournament.
Yeah, the only thing I can say, based on just this past week, is probably there's going to be a bunch of Kira decks, but even that could still change in a week, right?
Yeah, and the other thing to say is that, play a deck that has Silexes. You need a pretty good reason to not be playing a deck that runs Silexes. I mean, they're just so ridiculous.
Basically, if you're just mono-faction aggro, that's like the one reason to not play Silexes.
Yeah, there's just so much free value there. I also authored a letter about letting the players know about when the events happen. We still haven't heard about Worlds, and the deadline for when I can request time off is rapidly approaching, and I'm sure that's true for the other Worlds competitors, so I'll link it. I posted it on Reddit. Basically, I said, hey, look, we love this game. We love participating, and we want to participate to the best of our ability. please let us know when events are. But Stormblessed, you had a pretty good another perspective on this.
Yeah, so my perspective, I think I'm coming around to the side of they should start making more schedules for these sorts of things. But when I describe my theory, this is not me taking a stance one way or another, whether or not this is either the correct approach to things. This is just what I think is sort of in the background or in the foreground of what they're doing. So I think that they are basing their tournaments around both the balance patches and also around set designs, more set designs than not. So like, they want to have a tournament shortly after a set release, right? So like these throw-in championships are happening a few weeks after Awakening was released. But the thing is that Direwolf, I think ever since Dusk Road was sort of the set that I believe they said was the sort of their worst design set because they spent the least time on it. And so they were like, well, we got to spend the right amount of time to give people good sets. And so if they want to have time to give people good sets, then they don't want to constrain themselves with saying, hey, these are our tournament dates. We're going to have a tournament on blah date, because if you do that, and you want to also have a set release correspond with it, then you now have set an artificial deadline for your set release. And so I think they are prioritizing set quality in this aspect of giving them the freedom of when to release the sets, so that way they don't have to constrain it by the tournament dates, if that makes any sense. And then to a lesser extent, the balance patches as well, right? They could say, like, we're having a monthly balance patch date. The first Friday of every month will be a balance patch. That would be cool, right? Because it'd be like, we can know when to expect these things. Or like, if like there's no changes, be like, no changes today, everything's fine. Or, no changes, we're going to keep an eye on things. But the thing is, like, let's say it takes them 4 weeks to come up with the balance patch. If they had like 1 more week to do that, they might come up with a better patch, a better set of nerfs and buffs that are more fitting, that, don't kill cards as much, or, put more cards in the spotlight with buffs. So I think it's sort of the desire to push out quality content that is constraining their ability to have a schedule announced for future events, which, I think there's probably a better balance to be had there, but I think that's what's going on.
Yeah, and that's definitely along the lines of how Direwolf has done things. They've been okay delaying or not giving dates in order to make sure that their product is of high quality, and I think they've done a generally very good job of that. I think for things that they have the infrastructure, as long as like there aren't going to be technical difficulties involved, I'd really like to see dates for tournaments. And maybe we don't know what the name of the ECQ is, like if it's based off of, the new set or whatever. You can't name a tournament after a new set if the new set isn't released. But I think just having the dates of the tournaments and just fitting in the set releases wherever within that is better. Like, we don't have to, unless you're a content creator, you certainly don't have to like take a day off that the set is released, right? That set's going to be there, whenever you have your day off in the week. But that's not true for tournaments. And I just think that would be a lot better if we could have a tournament schedule, even if we don't know what sets are necessarily legal during those tournaments. I think if we just know when those tournaments are, it'll go a long ways. And a lot of this is based off of the ECQ, the last ECQ, which was 7 days after the announcement. And we had a really low attendance because of it. Like, a lot of 1711s made it into day 2.
I think it was the first ECQ or maybe the second ECQ to ever have a 17 and 11 get in. I think it was actually the first ECQ. I thought 17 11s have gotten into, there were some other tournaments that weren't ECQs that were sort of the style of ECQs that 17 11s got in, but I thought this was the first one that 17 11 had gotten into.
No, I think there was another thrown ECQ where I felt like I couldn't get an edge against the field, and like I feel like a lot of people couldn't, so that all the records were just like closer to 50% than normal.
But still, even if this is the second time ever, is still like, and this time was more based around low attendance than the format just being so close in nature.
Yeah, I suspect so. Obviously, I don't have the numbers to back this up completely,
Sure.
but that's definitely what it felt like. It felt like this was not a well-attended ECQ, and, well, because people only had 1 week in order to prepare for it.
I mean, I also know of people that just didn't know that it was happening.
Oh gosh, that's terrible.
Like, I know someone was like on Discord, there was like 4 hours of the tournament, and they're like, there was an ECQ this weekend? Well, I don't have time to play it anymore. There's only 4 hours left. That sucks. Because, there's only 1 week to discover the announcement happened. I certainly don't check the Direwolf Digital news page every day, right? So it's like, if you just happen to miss that day or whatever, then it takes you a week to discover that the announcement happened, then you're just out of luck.
Yeah. So hopefully, I mean, it's only been like a day since I posted that, and I got a bunch of signatures from other people who qualified for Worlds, like the Boxer, Lights Out Ace, Collector, and you can see the full list in the actual post.
The ideal situation would be this is not just a for World situation, like Worlds competitors being like, like, "Where we want the thingy, blah blah blah. Look at us, we're so cool." But like also like this would lead into a bit of like, hey, maybe we should also have an announcement for like ECQs months in advance. Like there was that one time that Direwolf gave us the next 3 months of tournaments in
Oh my
advance. It
goodness,
was
that was
great.
so
Do you
good.
remember that? Was that one ECQ where just randomly they're like, here are our next 3 months of tournaments, and everyone was just like, what? What is going on? This is a new era of Direwolf digital communication.
The era was unfortunately short-lived.
But yeah, so hopefully this is something that could change for the future as well.
Yes, hopefully. I mean, we can only hope. I mean, we're still waiting on the announcement for the next season of Eternal also. I certainly hope there is one. I mean, that keeps us in a job, right, with this podcast?
I mean, I think there will be. I hope there is, obviously. I certainly think Direwolf wants there to be a tournament aspect to Eternal, though, especially because a lot of these designers are, Magic pros. So obviously they want their game to have a competitive
Yeah.
environment as well.
So speaking of things that we can hopefully look forward to in the future of competitive Eternal, let's talk about this draft event. This was the first draft event of its kind where all the players that were qualified for the draft championship got to draft 3 times, and the top records made it into day 2. Now, there were some people like yourself who had buys into the event for making masters continuously for several months, right?
Yeah. Either you made a combination of if you top 100 got 10 points, top 20 got 20 points, and if you got 80 points, then you skipped day 1, which was just the best value, especially because this tournament has 4 world slots up for grabs, which is a lot of world slots compared to an ECQ. So you don't have to spike quite as hard for the tournament. And then because it's over such a prolonged period of time, it felt less intensive than having to say grind top 20 in both constructed formats 3 months in a row. Getting top 20 half the time is a lot easier than getting top 20 100% of the time, which is why I went for the 80-point buy.
Yeah, and the other thing is that at the end of the day, there were only 30 slots up for grabs for day 2, so you really had to be in the top 30. And I got very fortunate. Like, I got hooked up so hard on day 1, and I managed to make it. So we got to play in the top 64, and 8 times 8 is 64. So you draft twice, and you have to beat. Well, I guess it's not the same as Magic where you beat out your pod, huh? I guess you kind of have pods, even if you're not drafting together of 8 people. You have to win your first pod, and you only have to win your first game of the second pod in order to qualify, because there are 4 qualifications up for grabs.
I know that is kind of funny aspect to me, where it's like you get the second draft and then it's one match. It's kind of funny where it's like it's this, you do your second draft and then you have one match to decide if you get to Worlds or not. Thankfully there is a consolation prize where you still get $200 even if you don't get to the full world slot. But it is funny that like you do a match and your first match of the draft decides everything.
So the top 8 players include Stormblessed, who you just have to win one match in order to qualify for Worlds.
I know. Yeah, so my top 8 experience was I had 100% win rate day 1. It was great. I won every game I played day 1.
Stormblessed had the bye for those of you who didn't catch that earlier.
So I start my draft, and it's really funny. So a few days before the draft, I was, obviously the CBC crew was discussing, draft a lot because the draft championship was coming up, right? So we were focusing on draft for the past week or two. And there was just a random post in Discord from Avi who was picking Jotun Bonebreaker, who was like discussing Jotun Bonebreaker. And then M. Galp was like, yeah, Jotun Bonebreaker is a great part of the pack one, pick one. Jotun Bonebreaker is a 5-cost 5/5 legend, which has Surge, discard a card at random, draw a card, and Ultimate, if you discard 10 cards, it gets +10/+10, and then it becomes a 15/15 overwhelm. So the trick is, and then I'm going to point out, is that if you have no cards in hand, or rather, if your only card in hand is your power, you play your power, and then because it's discard then draw, you don't have to discard anything, right? So you basically just get a free card in hand. And I was like, oh, this is a really cute synergy that I didn't realize this is how the card worked, but I'm sure it'll never come up. And then so obviously my pack one pick one at the draft top 64 is Jotun Bonebreaker. So that was a funny moment. And then so I thought I drafted really well, and I ended up with just like a really solid deck. My 2 best cards are probably Torgov and Jotun Bonebreaker. Like those aren't spectacular, but like every card in my deck was just nothing but Bs, and it was just a really good deck. And I almost decked out twice that tournament, so that was fun. I went down to 4 cards and 2 cards in deck because So my deck was 3 Blur Haze Worms, 2 Seed of Creations, Levitate, Yolan Bonebreaker, and 2 Valley Clan
So
Sages.
you're drawing a lot of cards.
So I was just like chewing through my deck. Yeah, it was great. So that was really fun. I beat a very solid Haru deck in the top 64 match, and then I beat a World's Competitor Meal in the top 32. And then my top 16 match was against a very weird pool. So for those of you who don't know, we all got the draft pools for our competitors, right? We didn't get what decks they were playing, but we saw every card they drafted. So when I looked at my top 16 opponents pool, it was just this pile. I was like, okay, so this is probably a 4-faction or a 3-faction deck. I'm predicting it's these 3 factions or these 4 factions, and it was a different 3 factions than what I predicted. And I was like, well, but basically their deck had like 4 bombs, and it was like Roland's Iron Tyrant, right? That's a massive bomb. If you can stick Roland on the battlefield, you're probably gonna win the game. But the answer is they didn't get double shadow in one of their games, or they didn't draw in either game, and so they didn't draw their bombs, and so their other subpar cards just lost to my just collection of my cards were on average better, even if they were like Bone Breaker Weapon or Roland Iron Tyrant was stronger than any of my individual cards. Their average card was weaker, so the fact that they didn't draw their bombs meant that my average card got to kind of smash them. And then I got into the top 8, and I did a top 8 draft, which I think I like my draft, although I'm obviously not going to say anything too much about it because we still have that match to do at some point.
Yeah, so Stormblessed is going to be playing one match in order to try to qualify for Worlds. We don't know when that is. We don't even know what cards you're going to be playing. Like, are you certain that you're going to be able to keep these cards?
At the end of the draft championship, when they had to delay, they announced the delays. They said that the thing that would be the most fair to do is to let the person that couldn't draft at some point, and then everyone else who drafted gets to keep their pool of cards. So the draft I got is the draft that I should keep unless Direwolf, changes what needs to happen for, I suppose, technical reasons. Because, this game is digital, so there might be some technical issues that occur with trying to keep people their draft pools. I don't know. But theoretically, I should get to keep my draft pool. So if you're in the top 8, you liked your draft, that's good. If you're in the top 8, you didn't like your draft, well, that's bad, I guess.
All right, well, best of luck to you whenever that happens. Rounding out the top 8, we have Gunner116 One Punch, who is the streamer E-Money Bags, Portich, Vaderman, World's Competitor Twanbon, Gozu, and A-Rank. So some pretty good people to root for. I mean, I like half of these people I've had interactions with them one way or another and would like them to qualify for Worlds.
Well, that's a good thing, Sunny, because only half of them can qualify for Worlds.
Well, yeah, hopefully a lot of them will. And the other weird thing is that Twanbon is a Worlds competitor. So one of these people is going to lose their winning in for Worlds and still qualify. So we don't know who that is or how it's going to be determined, but that is something that's going to happen.
I thought it was funny that I think it was 6 Worlds competitors were in the top 64 of the draft event. It was a lot of them. I know Collector, Biol, you. I think LOA was Boxer in the top 64. I don't know.
I don't remember.
It was amusing how many people were in the top 64.
Most of us lost pretty quickly.
So Sunny, you had your draft streamed by Direwolf.
Yeah, that was a lot of fun. So, I mean, one awesome aspect about this draft tournament is that we got to see the drafts that people did. So the first one that was streamed live was Cassandrith. And then I was told that maybe they'd want to stream my draft. So I recorded a video of it, a screen capture of it, and then played it back for them so that we could stream it to the audience. And that was a lot of fun. I mean, being featured in a draft pod is something that never happened to me in my competitive Magic days. And yeah, just getting to do that was awesome. I think a lot of people enjoyed it. Like, people like backseating drafts, right? So that was a lot of fun. I mean, the whole event, just like having a draft tournament, is a lot of fun and definitely something that I'd like to see more of. And if they can hammer out their technical difficulties, that would be amazing. But anyway, I drafted a really strong deck. It was an Elysian deck that just had a lot of really good cards, similar to what you were describing.
If I recall seeing your deck list, your deck had overall good card quality compared to, say, my top 16 opponent who just had some, Penitent Bulls, which I think is just a bad draft card. But your deck had, I think my average card quality was still slightly higher than yours, but your deck had a pretty reasonable high card quality, as well as some just like massive bombs. I think I got like a pack 4, like pick 2 Wump or something, like just some ridiculous late gifts.
It was later than that. It was like pick 4 or something. It wasn't one of the first 3 picks.
I remember seeing that. I was like, oh my gosh, Sunny, what a giant like gift that is. I remember seeing. I was just like shocked at that super late, rewarded for your diligent drafting, I suppose, right? Because you draft well and you get rewarded by getting the hookup in later packs.
Yeah, I felt like I drafted pretty well, but boy, did I make a fatal mistake against Cosmo. I mean, my first round was Hats on Lamp, who is arguably one of the best drafters in Eternal. They are also help make Farming Eternal, which is a podcast entirely based on draft. And I mean, my deck was great. Like, I won, and it wasn't too difficult. And then I played against Cosmo, who is another arguably one of the best drafters in Eternal, and they were on a mono fire deck, and that was the one thing that I did not want to run into. I did not want to run into an aggressive deck that could get under me before my just like powerful cards could take over the game. In the first game, I had to redraw to 6, and it was a very close game, but I ended up losing. In the second game, I kept a hand that was unkeepable. It's an absolutely inexcusable mistake, and I lost because of it. And I just don't know how I am capable of, having played card games for this long and done so well at them, of making such a horrible, like, instant losing decision like that. That wasn't even pressured. I wasn't roping or anything. Anyway, I was pretty frustrated with myself after that.
Yeah, that sounds. Part of it also is probably, I imagine that if you weren't already qualified for Worlds, you might have, played a bit better.
I don't like using that. Okay, so I used that excuse when I lost in the ECQ immediately after I qualified for Worlds. I think that's fair because my heart just really wasn't in it. But man, I love draft and I love best of 3 limited. It's not something we get to play very often.
That is fair. That's something that we've only ever played once before, actually. There was one other draft event where if you made top 64, you got to play best of 3 limited event. Literally one other event in the history of Eternal. This is the second time we've ever had this opportunity.
Yeah. So I was pretty frustrated with myself, but hey, still qualified. That's cool, I guess. Feeling less like I deserve it now, but looking forward to, playing in more draft tournaments later.
If Sunny has to lose to something, at least he lost to his baby Monofire, right?
I guess so. I do love Modifier deck, even in draft. The event had a lot of technical difficulties. It was actually postponed once the top 8 was reached. We don't know when that's going to play out.
There were a lot of technical issues. We're not gonna. It was unfortunate how many there were, but hopefully they can iron it out based on this and give us more draft events in the future. It was an amazing event in spite of everything.
Yeah, and if you remember when they were building their infrastructure for the ECQ tournaments, they had those couple of test tournaments. And the first one, like, they couldn't even play out the top 64 because there was some issue that happened. I don't know if they ever redid it.
I actually did not participate in the ECQ test because I didn't participate in the first ever ECQ. Maybe they should have hosted a test draft tournament to get everything ironed out. I would have been okay with that.
Yeah, me too. They actually did that for the last one. That's the one that Man and Mouse won. So it's kind of interesting that they didn't do it again. But anyway, hopefully they iron out their technical difficulties. We get more events like this because it was an absolute blast. I would pay a lot of money to play in these events. I don't know how true that is across the board. I think Constructed is generally more popular than draft, but boy, I would pay, like, as someone who has flown across the country to go to draft tournaments, I would pay a lot of money in order to participate in draft tournaments in Eternal.
I would play a slightly more reasonable amount of money to play in draft tournaments in Eternal, but I would also be willing to give Direwolf some of their money back.
All right, let's talk about the impact of some of the Awakening cards. Our last episode, if you missed it, we went through every single Awakening card and gave our evaluation of it. And now we've gotten a chance to see some of those cards in action. Just as a whole, how do you feel about your initial evaluation, Stormblessed? Because I feel pretty solid about mine. I don't think I was, like, surprised by any cards.
Oh, I think I was right on point. I mean, a little minor variations, some slight reordering of cards, but I think I was on point.
All right, so let's talk about some of these. Let's start off with Alhead, who is, I think Alhead is great in Expedition. I don't know if Alhead's going to be a thing in Throne. It's just, like, a totally different landscape. Throne is just so cutthroat right now. And Jeez, like playing a mono time deck or a deck that is very, very heavily time just feels like you're missing out on a lot of the broken stuff you can do in Throne. But an Expedition where the bar is lower and like there's a lot more attacking, blocking, and combat, boy, Owlhead is a house.
Yeah, I definitely think All Head's going to be better in Expedition, although future cards might be better in Throne on the list. But I don't know really how to feel about All Head either. I want to love it in Throne. I love it in Expedition for obvious reasons, because it's just just way better there. But in Throne, it's an interesting card. I think it's still going to be very good. Um, part of the thing might be that might be that all head might be what you want to play in sort of like a time-based praxis list or a time-based Combray list, but you can't play those because they don't have Silexes, because all head really is a kind of mid-rangey card at heart in a lot of ways. Like you can have more aggressive starts with it, where you can start with time symbol into all head, into second time symbol with an evangel in hand, like beat for 5 on like turn 3, playing second all head or whatever. But a lot of all head is a very mid-rangey card at heart, right? You play a solid attacker early that becomes an even more solid attacker in the mid game, that becomes a potentially late game huge threat if it ever reaches that point, right? So it's like a super mid-rangey card. And so the super mid-rangey power base is Silexes. So without Silexes, you can't, like, all head's so much worse without Silexes than compared to say like Kira more of is a card that's better without Silexes because it's a more aggressive combo-y card, whereas all head really wants to take advantage of both the influence from that, because there might be some other double faction cards you'd like to play, as well as the fact that it just really supports Silex's having the extra treasure trove a lot better than a more aggressive combo-y card. So it's possible that if we get the other two Silexes, that this could improve all head in a Throne environment, because maybe those other two faction pairs would want it more. That being said, I think all head is very good, and I am trying out both Xenon and Elysian all headed versions of the deck because I like the card a lot.
Yeah, before we get on to what we like about Owlhead and Expedition, um, I think that it definitely has a shot for being playable once we get the Praxis Silex. Like, I think the thing that you want to pair with Owlhead, you want to curve like Owlhead into Milos or something, or like you want to have a deck that has you basically just want to have a deck that has charge units. It wants to be aggressive, and you want to be charging.
I mean, if you're not charging it, Praxis tokens with all head seems also reasonable. Like playing like the Xenon
I
Obelisk, like some tokens with
I
it.
kind of feel like the time for tokens in Throne has just kind of passed because the sweepers are so good and so prevalent.
It's fair.
I don't know. I could be wrong. So what's your favorite flavor of Owlhead in Expedition? I have just been playing. I think I was just playing Mono Time, and I was playing Broken Contract with it.
Well, I mean, I'm also playing Broken Contract, but I think that you can play Broken Contract as even like a 1 or 2 of with petitions, because that way you're not really limiting your influence that much, if at all. So I think there are some very very cool things to do with Broken Contract as smaller than 4 of numbers in a very heavy influence heavy deck. I think I like it with. I'm leaning towards Elysian because you can play Dazzle. If you can support Dazzle, that is, because the powerful thing about cheap threats is that you can hold up your cheap counterspell to defend your cheap threats, right? Playing a 2-cost 5/5 is a lot better when you can defend it, right? Compare like all head as a 5/5 overwhelm to Sandstorm Titan, right? They're both reasonable
Yeah.
attackers, but one lets you hold up your combat trick, right? So like, I think I like all head in both because Xenon gives you like Curtain Call, right, which is still a powerful card, and Elysian gives you cards like Dazzle or Equivocate or something. So I'm leaning towards a 2-faction all head pairing. Also because I don't really want to be playing a mono faction deck that's not an aggro deck in Throne. Because again, the Silex
Well,
value
yeah. I
has.
mean, I'm playing aggressively with Owlhead.
I think mid range all head is
I
better.
think it's more aggressive than you're giving it credit for.
Which is fair. I think that's part of the beauty of the card and the card design is that there's a variety of different ways to build the deck, right? I'm willing to believe that there is a more aggressively slanted version of the all head deck. I just like the other versions better, or I think that they have more promise, or the gameplay, I enjoy playing with it more.
All right. Speaking of aggressive slant, let's talk about Kira next.
Kira has been dominating everything, right? So like I said, all head was a 5, Kira was the 4. Apparently, Kira might have been the 5, all head was the 4. Although we'll see how the format shakes out, after a week or two. Like Kira just was even better than I expected, and I think certainly better than Suny expected.
Yeah, it might have been a little better than what I was expecting. I've been playing a Rakano Kira deck in Throne, and it feels like there's definitely potential there. Basically, I'm pairing it with Rebel Sharpshooter and the charge spell. It's one of the from spells. It gives charge and decay.
Wait, Rebel Sharpshooter, the 3/3 that gets quick drop and has 4 more attack, the draft card?
No. The clan Sharpshooter or something. It's something
Uh,
Sharpshooter, isn't it? Highland Sharpshooter. It's a 3/2 that has
oh,
renown.
Highland Sharpshooter. Oh, the old
Three
Highland
two
Sharpshooter. Oh yes,
renown.
her. Oh yes, her with everyone's favorite trick of playing her into Warhelm and being like blah blah. But this is now
Yeah,
her with From Within. So then you give the top of your deck +5/+3 charge decay. Yeah, that seems pretty good.
yeah, and it works well with Kira. I haven't been playing that many spells in the deck. Justice Etchings works really well with Kira.
Yes.
That is, it's a draw two, or I guess it's draw two plus trade a card in your market, which is insane for 1 power. And Kira usually has endurance, so that you get to block with it too.
Remember when I said the endurance on Kira was gonna matter a lot, and you're like, I don't know. Well, I did convince you. Though. I did convince you.
Yeah.
So it's not like you still were maintaining that it wasn't gonna be relevant. But also, by the way, friends in low places, I did say that was still gonna be good with Kira as well.
Yeah, I like it's been okay because this deck is a Rakano deck that plays Ironthorn and generates a ton of influence.
Yeah,
But I think it's not a 4 of anymore. I think it's just a 1 of in the market if you have the influence. Anyway, so I'm playing that with like Trickshot Ruffian. I think that the shell needs some work. There's Hojan is another great card for this, and I think Ikaria is pretty good. The 2-cost Ikaria, just because if you are generating a lot of influence, a 2-cost 4/3 endurance flyer is a pretty good rate. It just feels like this deck is missing something. Of course, I've only had like a couple days to tune it, but
I was looking at the list, and I think the card it's missing is Silverblade Intrusion.
oh gosh. Is that still good? It doesn't
Yes.
seem that good to me.
So what Silverblade Intrusion is A, it defends your units, from damage-based removal and combat, which is relevant, which is still very relevant, But also it targets 2 units, right? Your deck is full, if you have like a Hojin and a Kira in play, you can target both of them. If you have 2 Kiras in play, you can target both of them. Highland Sharpshooter and Kira, you can target both of them. The fact that it can target 2 things is very relevant in a deck that cares about targeting its units.
Yeah, you might be right. I think that some of these units can probably be trimmed. Like this version is playing a bunch of 3-cost units. I'll put the deck list in the description for what I'm working with. But like it feels like there's potential here. It feels like Kira is very good in this deck and good enough to be in Throne, which is, a pretty high bar. And I just need to work on this a little more, I think.
I think Kira is going places. She is certainly ascending to high heights.
Oh gosh. Okay, next, Broken Contract. Have you seen this card much? Because I've tried it, and I tried it with Petition a lot, and then I decided that I didn't really like it with Petition. I just like it when I drew it naturally and play, other 2-drops in the Petition slot because you want to be playing an aggressive deck. When it works out the way you want to, it can be very good, but like it comes at a pretty big cost, and I'm not sure it's quite as good as you hyped it up to be.
Yeah, I think it might be a little worse than I have to be. I'm still trying to petition broken contract dreams myself because I just want that to work. But I mean, again, I don't think it can be just a 4 of without petition in all head deck, for example, because all head wants its influence, right? I guess the balance behind this card is that it's hard to play with cards that really care about influence, right? It really limits it to basically just mono fire aggro in that sense, which I still think it's probably very good there. Like I think you could just play, I think you'd even still play Jack, like 4 broken contracts and 4 seal devotions. I mean, if you're playing petition for certainly. Jack requires both more and less than you think. Like there was that the ECQ with Chonky Skycrag, Skycrag that was just full of X5s, whatever. Played like 9 primal sigils and a Jack, right? So like if that deck can play a bunch of 9 off fire power, then like certainly monofire can support having 8 factionless power, which makes your deck a lot better, especially if you are trying the petition variant, because then you obviously can support deck at that point. I think the card still has a lot of potential. The next thing I'm curious about trying it is in some sort of tokens build or sacrifice build, because it's a power that produces something that can be sacrificed or as just a token. So I think that's my next move potentially. Like I think I saw, I don't know if it's still kept up. I think I saw Boxer on ladder playing petition with broken contract and even Vox, and I thought that was really cute.
can't block doesn't count as a keyword, right? It just
No.
you sacrifice into something that costs you. Okay, I guess it wouldn't matter because it would be 3.
Why would it be 3? Oh, for what's it called?
If it was a keyword, like it would be 3, and it's an even deck anyway, so it doesn't matter.
Oh yeah, well even Vox doesn't play. That's like 5 faction even Vox. This was just regular even Vox.
Okay.
I don't think 5 faction even Vox can support a factionless power.
Yeah. Well, I mean, if you're just petitioning for one of them, sorry, I'm thinking of Kilo, not Vox,
Yes.
right?
Although to be fair, Kilo and Vox were in the same deck at some point, so it's not like that's an unreasonable thing.
Yeah, it does seem like something that could go well with Vox.
Yeah, so I mean, I think there's still moves to be made here, and I think the card is still powerful enough to work for. But it was not as easy a slam dunk to just like throw it in a deck. Like, just throw Jack in a deck and it works out really well. This card did end up needing a little bit more massaging to make work in the deck, but I think it will still get there because the card is still very powerful.
Uh-huh.
But yes, I haven't seen anyone else playing it, which surprises me. I've been playing it a bunch, but I've seen like one person that was Boxer playing it. I am just like, do they hate value? Do people hate value, Suny?
People like value too much. I don't know what you're talking about.
Then why aren't they playing this card on ladder?
I think it just doesn't. I think it's just more awkward than you think it is, and
I guess they're all playing
like
Kira decks. Like everyone's playing Kira.
yeah,
So
like I think the powerful cards that require a lot of influence are better than Broken Contract. But like
maybe
it's still like up in the air. I'm not saying that for certain,
if
but
if
that's
Mono
the
Fire is
feeling that I'm
good,
getting.
it's Mono Fire is good. It's playing Broken Contract. That's all I'm saying.
Okay.
Is Mono Fire good right now? Maybe, maybe not. But if it is, it certainly should be playing Broken Contract.
All right. I'm not sure. I'm not sold on the petition though. I think that is
Petition might be too cute, but
yeah.
I'm still working on that. But that one might be off.
Let's talk about another one of these cards that's really powerful that probably doesn't want to see play with Broken Contract because you're trying to build up a ton of influence, and that's Jarrall. I saw a Jarrall deck, but it wasn't like the Jarrall was not a big deal. It was Helio that killed me, and that's kind of how I feel about this type of thing. Like it might be fine in a Helio deck, but I don't think it's like that exciting, and the stats are still super awkward.
So I think my misplacing of Draw is that I think Draw is better than Akantha, at least in Throne, anyways. Expedition, I haven't touched Expedition as much as I have played Throne, so I can't really speak there quite as much. But certainly in Throne, Draw at least has made more of an impact than Akantha. And I think Draw is a good card. So again, I said it was not going to be amazing. I said it was going to be a solid role player that will help support the deck and prop it up. Well, not being WinCon, that's sort of what it's become. It's a 1/3 that can sort of block, hold on the fort. Sometimes it's a 3/5. It'll attack and draw a card. Sometimes that's pretty decent, right? You don't need it to do more than that to be good and playable. So I think the card is good. I think it will see play. I've seen Elysian draw decks. I've seen Skycrag draw decks. I haven't seen a mono primal draw deck, but I assume that exists as well. I think there's various forms of it, and I think the card is very decent. And if you're playing a heavy primal deck with a good number of spells or fate cards or whatever, I think this is a very solid inclusion. You should probably be playing it.
All right, so maybe it's a solid role player in these Helio decks, but I still think that those decks are being fueled by Helio, and it's just a matter of finding the supporting cost to Helio. And this is a card that could easily be cut somewhere down the line.
Sure, I mean, someday if there are better cards, you can cut this card. But for right now, at this point in the current Eternal experience, I think this card is a solid role player in a heavy primal deck, and I don't think that's a bad place to be at either.
All right,
it's not every card needs to be an all header Akira.
Okay, Reactor Forge. This one was a really interesting one, and when I tried to play it, I just kept on dying to Stone Scar. I think it's really dependent on how many aggro decks are in the format, because like if you're playing with this card, you might you're probably doing 10 damage to yourself with it over the course of the game. If you're playing an aggro deck and your opponent says, I'm going to deal 10 damage to myself, you're like, go right ahead, buddy. I'm down with that.
Yeah, Reactor Forge seems to be a meme card currently. I haven't seen any exceptionally powerful decks like the Reactor Forge decks. When they win hard, and it is very cool to watch and very fun to play with. But I haven't seen the consistency to balance out that you just kind of die when you play it. But there's a variety of options. I like the potential that it has. For fun and interesting deck building, right? There's so many ways to play the card, right? You can play it in sort of mid-rangey styles. You can play it with like Talia, you can play it with Midius combo, you can play it with, there's a variety of combo decks, and there's still a lot of play to it, but I don't think the card is going to be tier 1.
Yeah, I did try to build a Great Kiln Titan deck that used it, and when it went off, it was pretty cool, but I don't think it was very good. I kind of wonder if it has a place in some sort of even deck that, goes up to, maybe plays Midius, maybe not. Midius is a pretty bad strategy, I think, generally. But fueling the even-handed golems, or ways to pick up the even-handed golem, or your Soul's Rest, stuff like that, maybe, but I'm pretty low on this card now.
I don't think Soul's Rest is very with Reactor Forge, because you actually detriment for having the extra turn with Reactor Forge. I think if you're playing an 8-mana card, you want to be winning the game with Reactor Forge, not winning the game next turn, because you take more damage.
A lot more damage.
So I think if you're playing Reactor Forge, you want to have potentially have some way to deal with it yourself. I know, like, Batteries is a big fan of Pause for Reflection. Like, I can pause my Reactor Forge, but like, don't play Pause for Reflection.
Yeah, I've been trying that too.
So my next move with Reactor Forge memes might be Volatility Sea of Teeth. I can play Sea of Teeth and kill my own Reactor Forge so I don't die.
Great. So then you have like 4 power total, 4 maximum power on the next turn after you play your 5/1/1 killers.
Well, so the goal would be that, like, I play like a big threat, and then I play, as my second big threat, Sea of Teeth, right? So like I get like 2 turns of having 7 mana, right? I take 3, and then I kill them when I gain 4 power. Basically, it'd be sort of like the ideal situation, which I think is probably actually good. Using it as like gain 8 power seems pretty decent to me over the course of like 4 turns. But yeah, so that's Reactor Forge. So speaking of, we were talking about Pause Reflection and, Batteries loving meme cards. Speaking of cards Batteries loves that is way less of a meme, Dazzle. Dazzle seems really good. Sunny, what do you think of Dazzle?
Yeah, I couldn't find the right place for it. It does seem really good. I think it's just better than Backlash. Are you with me on it being better than Backlash at this point, or still need convincing?
Yeah. I'm on
Okay.
board. Yeah, fine. You got me, Sunny. It's better than Backlash. It's a lot better than Backlash. Okay.
Okay.
Gosh.
Yeah, I haven't.
It's so much better than Backlash. It does a lot of things, and Backlash does far less things.
Yeah, so I tried it in an even deck, like an even Elysian deck, but I think that deck had its own problems. I'm definitely interested to see where this is actually going to be good. Maybe in some sort of like Skycrag Helio deck that uses fire cards to aggressively use up the power, like things like Torch that are cheap that you can deploy quickly after you've drawn a ton of cards with Helio. So like that's kind of where I'm leaning toward this card. I haven't tried it out yet, but seems like a powerful card. Just need to find the right place for it.
Yeah, I think Elysian shells are pretty decent for it. As I was saying, do you see these good 2-drops that have the benefit of costing 2 and being big, and having be able to back them up? Playing any of your good 2-drops and holding up Dazzle, like playing a Jarrall or an Allhead, or I would say Kira, but again, the thing is you can't play Kira and Dazzle together because, well, one, I don't think that they don't synergize as well together because it's not a combat trick. Like Silver Intrusion can protect Kira and combat the opponent, whatever.
Yeah.
But even if you could, even they did synergize well together, you can't really play them because you don't have Haru Silex. So that really limits Dazzle in this ways to really be like Skycrag or Elysian. I guess Felon is sort of a place it could also be, but Felon 90 Silex also really hurts Felon a lot. But you could potentially be playing it in Felon. But really, you can't really play in Haru because Haru just doesn't have the influence. Like playing Dazzle and Silver Knight in a Haru deck sounds really cool, but we don't have Haru Silex, so the influence makes it so hard to play with.
Yeah.
But Dazzle, if you're playing a Jarrall, an Allhead, or like a Wump, which is also a heavy primal card, playing like Wump, holding up Dazzle to protect the Wump seems pretty decent to me. So I like the card. I think the card is going to be very good, but it is also possible that, again, Silex is their king, and, you got to find the right Silex version of it. But I think the card's going to be great. And if there's a primal deck that's good in the format, a heavy primal deck, then Dazzle's probably going to be a part of it.
Yeah, and I think that Elysian is probably the place for it because, like, Time has a lot of weaknesses. It has the great stats, but it has a weakness in that its interaction is barely there at all, right?
Well, but you have like the one card that the 2 cost delay and
Yeah.
metal.
Yeah. So like Dazzle does a good job of kind of showing its weaknesses by being a flexible card, as well as, just being able to negate the harsh rules, which have wrecked time decks since the beginning of
Since
time.
time
Rather.
immemorial, you could say.
Yes, I could say. I
But
suppose.
you won't.
Well, I mean, that's definitely something on my to-do list between this week and next week's cast when we talk about what's actually good in Throne, is to try out a deck that is either Skycrag or Elysian that's really heavy on the primal influence and makes use of things like Wump and maybe Helio, or maybe not all these cards at the same time, but that seems like a good place for Dazzle.
At the same time, Sunny? Wait, why wouldn't you want to play them at the same time?
Well, Helio decks like to play Hailstorm, and that can be kind of awkward with Wump, but it might be worth it. Like, you just get up to the point where your Wump flips, and when your Jarrall is a 3/5, and then you just Hailstorm anyway. Like that's
as I like to say, you can just sequence your cards. Like with a Wump, you play it if it would flip, or like if you're against like a Stone Scar deck, right? If the Wump dies, you don't care. Like if you have to like 3 for 2 and kill your Wump to kill your opponent's 3, cards in Stone Scar, like, yeah, it's not the best situation. It's still not, awful. And or if you're playing a Stone Scar, you just don't play the Wump because you have other things you have to do to impact the board early game better ways, anyways. So I don't think you want to be playing like Harsh Rule and Oni Ronin in the same deck. I think Wump and Hailstorm can make sense, specifically because Wump flips into 6/6, so that means that the Hailstorm doesn't always kill it.
Yeah.
So you can sort of play it well.
I kind of feel like we might get to the point where we have a resurgence of Garden of Omens, because you can draw a ton of cards with Helio. You are playing a million Silexes, so and like petitions and whatnot. So making all those 2-cost spells cost 1 is a pretty big deal. So I feel like that has
the Return of Spellcrag.
Yeah, I think that we might be seeing a resurgence of that. But again, like this is hypothetical. Haven't tested it out yet. Let's spend some time talking about what decks you have seen on the ladder. So a couple decks that I've seen a lot recently is an even mill deck, a Feln mill deck that is even-handed Golem. I don't think it's that great. I think it's just kind of the flavor of the day. But I think the deck that really is something is Elysian Katra, like the Elysian Katra Reanimator. I've been pretty impressed by that.
Elysian Katra?
Sorry, Xenon Katra. Deck seems to be like really consistent. I mean, they always seem to have the Katra when I'm playing against them. And they generate a ton of power and play defense well enough in order to get their engine online and gain a ton of life.
Yeah, Xenon Katra was a very solid deck coming into the even Xenon Rakano metagame. But then of course, Rakano sort of smashed into it like really hard and just like destroyed it. And so like the deck was solid back then, and didn't really get hit by any of the nerfs and buffs. So like it just kind of survived, right? Never count out the Reanimator decks, as always. Like they just always pop back up. It's like whack-a-mole, like bam, 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 bam. They're like, here I am. It's like oh, I forgot Gavel in the market. Whoops. But yes, I think the decks have a lot of promise. Actually, I haven't seen them yet on much, but I'm also like Gold 1, so. I started in silver because I didn't get to masters last month, so
they use the hourglass to help them ramp, and then with the addition of Silexes,
yes.
like you get to draw cards with your power. I mean, it's a really cool deck.
I mean, I don't know if it's playing Akantha or Alhead, but pulling the cards out of the void means that you get to put extra influence in play, right? So you could potentially support some of these really high influence cards because they can generate influence by just generating lots of power.
Yeah, I don't think it wants any of the new cards. I just can't think of any, because it does generate a lot of influence, but what it's doing is bigger than just going for an Alhead, right?
I know. The real problem is that Katra is foreshadow, so it's harder to get to Allhead 6th time and having the foreshadow for Katra. I think if Allhead was the shadow card and Akantha was the time card, which obviously doesn't fit how the factions work at all, but like let's just suppose it was the case, then I think that the deck would play Allhead if Allhead was just shadow, because having a 3/3 that becomes a 5/5 is a decent way to shore up the ground game to get to your broken stuff, as well as just having a decent card early and late. Whereas the fact that Akantha really is very, very aggressive, and the deck isn't super aggressive, means that the new Akantha doesn't fit quite as well into the Xenon Katra list.
Yeah.
I mean, the deck probably could play Pull in the Shadows, I guess, but
I don't think you want to, because you've got too many 8-drops that you're trying to grasp.
Yeah, but you're already playing Grasp anyways, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, you have Grasp but in Expedition though, you can play Pull in the Shadows and pull Katra back out of the void, because Like, yeah, you're paying one more for Katra, but you do get the +1/+1, and Katra is just a lot of times worth it because it'll already be like, like a 10-7. Maybe like a 12-9 when it's
Yeah,
played.
Katra's one of the most insane cards in the last set. I mean, it's just a matter of finding a place for her because I think like her impact when she hits the board can be so ridiculous.
Or if you wait for Xenon to be released, then Katra will just easily store up because you'll get to play the best Vow for Katra, which is to say, her own Vow that fixes
Yeah.
for her while putting cards in the void.
Yeah, so I mean, she just gains a ton of life, is really big, and puts a lot of power into play. All those things are good. All right, so are there any other decks out there that you think that people should keep an eye out for as we go into our, I guess it's not an ECQ prep, but like championship prep week, basically?
Yeah, I think really it's just keep an eye on the Kiras and the All Heads. Yeah, in a lot of ways. I mean, have maybe look at the Zine and Contra stuff. Make sure your deck doesn't just fold the Reanimator. But for the most part, I've just seen a lot of Kiras on ladder. I've seen Haru Kiras. I've seen Rakano Kiras. I've seen Mono Justice Kiras. Everyone loves Kira.
All right, let's wrap it up by talking about, well, kind of a hot button issue as we're getting into the end of Worlds qualifications, and that is the wildcards. There are 4 wildcard slots that will be qualified for Worlds. We have no idea what the method for this is, or if there's going to be a tournament, or they're going to just choose people from Eternal or from other games. So I assume you've heard some of the discussion around this, Stormblessed. What's your take on this?
My take is that I hope Direwolf announces things in advance. Communication to sort of circle back around to the opening topic. I'm just sort of waiting for what they do. Obviously, I've been petitioning for not the latest iteration of Scion Draft, but an updated Scion Draft tournament for one of the wildcard slots. That's the thing that I've been like, we should have a Scion Draft tournament. Although I would even be okay if we had a Scion Draft tournament that wasn't for a wildcard slot, that was just a cool draft tournament. Maybe I just want a draft tournament in general. I'm really curious. I honestly, think the invitational thing from like, inviting a bunch of other card game players, I guess, and having like another invitational tournament, like, if you invite like 16 other card game players and say, hey, you get to the top 4 of this tournament, you get to go to our world or something, is not out of the question. But aside from that, I don't know how they're going to do it. And so I'm curious to find out. And I hope we find out by like, I mean, I'm assuming October is when wildcards are going to happen, and then November is when World is going to happen. But again, we have no idea because we don't know.
Yeah, I think that the fact that they've not announced anything about it means that a lot of people want a tournament, and a lot of the tournament players have been like, hey, I've top aided, an ECQ. I'd like another shot at this. I think that the fact that we haven't heard anything about it is really bad news for those folks. I just can't imagine them coming up with a tournament announcement and being like, oh, these people are qualified based on, this point system that we didn't announce that has not been available to the public. So I just feel like it's going to be.
I mean that could still happen though, right? We honestly don't know it. It could be based on previous tournament performance, depending on how many people have the tournament performances. We just have no idea because they just haven't announced anything.
Right.
I think the answer is that Direwolf themselves, they haven't confirmed in themselves what's going on either, because otherwise they would have announced something. It's possible that one of the reasons they haven't announced anything is because they've been like reaching out to well-known names in other card gaming communities, and obviously, if they're in communication with other people, they don't want to formally announce some sort of like invitational tournament without knowing who's going to be invited.
Yeah.
So that could be why it hasn't been announced yet. But aside from that, it's possible they just don't. They haven't confirmed themselves what the qualification requirements are.
Yeah, I think you touched on what is the most likely scenario is that they are in contact with people who play, other card games, and either they
Yeah.
don't know, they haven't gotten confirmation from everyone yet, or they are just waiting until like, a couple weeks before the tournament to build up hype for it before announcing any of that.
I mean, personally, I don't think that's even the worst idea. Like obviously, I wish that there was like an in-client Eternal tournament, whatever, for more of the community, not an invitational thing, or even a based on past performances. But like, if they were to invite like 16 or 32 players from other communities, like like a Brian Kibler, if Brian Kibler is allowed to compete in Eternal stuff now, because at one point he was a consultant, I believe,
Yes,
for
that's true.
Eternal. So, but I think that time has passed, though. I think he's allowed to do things again because of.
Yeah, it's 2 years after they stop working, and I think it's been 2 years for him.
Yeah, so like if they were to invite like the Brian Kiblers for like a 16 or 32 person invitational where the top 4 get to Worlds. I don't think that's a bad thing either. I mean, it's a little awkward to announce it so late or whatever, but like I don't hate that idea. Like obviously I'd rather have another shot at it, but I don't think it's a terrible idea.
I actually think that that's the best. I think that's the best solution that I've heard is inviting streamers not just straight to Worlds, but rather having them having a tournament. Like that seems like a great
Yeah.
solution to this. I don't know what
Yeah,
the
if
financials
it was
are, but
just inviting it to World, if it was just like here are 4 names that get to go to Worlds, I would hate that. But if it was like 16 or 32 names that get into an invitational that go to Worlds, I wouldn't hate that. Or even like maybe like the top, maybe like 2 wildcard slots go to that tournament. Right? You have a top 16, and then if you get to the finals, those 2 people get to go to Worlds or something. And then the other 2 wildcard slots are for something else. I think something like that could really work out rather than just inviting them directly. If they had a tournament for that, I wouldn't mind.
yeah, that just sounds like the best solution I've heard. I also wouldn't be opposed to them just inviting streamers outside the game, but in comparison to the solution that you suggested, I think that's a lot worse. Like if you could, but also like it takes a lot more organization, money, and time in order to get this tournament going to play for the wildcard spots. So I could see that not being doable. Like you'd have to pay these other streamers to promote your
I
game.
know.
So anyway, I think that the folks out there, like a lot of the things that I've heard what the community wants for the wild card, I just don't think that that's what's going to happen. And like that's not me being wanting to rain on people's parades, and it's not me just being a contrarian, which I can be, I know, but I think that's just like the reality of the situation. I think that getting your hopes up for one of those solutions, like having a tournament based on whatever, or having the members of Worlds, the wild cards go to people in the Eternal community that have contributed a lot. I just feel like with every passing day that becomes less likely.
I don't know. I think the most likely scenario is this invitational to other card game players from other communities. Like it could be literally anything because we just don't really know. There are some likely possibilities and some unlikely possibilities. And honestly, the answer is that we're gonna have to wait and see. Earlier the better, but hopefully early October at the latest.
Yeah. And
Um,
hopefully we find out what's going on for tournaments in the future and for Worlds.
yeah,
And
yeah. Hopefully, we'll about all those things.
yeah, I guess the only thing we can do is wait and see. Next week, we'll be back with a Throne Championship preview, as we always do. And until then, have fun battling with the new Awakening cards, and best of luck to Stormblessed. Everyone cheer for Stormblessed whenever he plays out his one match winning in for Worlds.
Well, technically, you still have to play out the whole top 8, right? Because there still is the first place does get more money, and obviously you want to win the thing because of glory and pride and stuff, right?
Okay, but how much do you really care about that? Like compared to the Worlds qualification?
I mean, a lot less, but I mean, I do. Obviously, I want to win, right? You want to win, playing a tournament because you want to win this tournament.
How about this? Which would you rather take? 100% on winning your next match and losing the following one, or 75% for winning the whole thing, but 25%
I'd
chance?
probably take 100.
Yeah,
Well,
exactly, right?
okay, that's a mean question because the answer is obviously 100% go to Worlds, right?
Yeah, exactly. So like people can cheer for you for the next one, and then they can choose whether or not they want to continue cheering for you or just like stop caring.
The coolest thing, the upside, the silver lining to having the top 8, what's it called, postponed, is that if they do stream the top 8 and they do cast it, then they can presumably cast every match of the top 8, right? Because you have 4 matches, then 2 matches, then 1 match, and that's only 7 matches they'd have to cast total, which is about how many matches they cast, from front to back, if not less, in a regular ECQ, right? So like they could presumably cast every match in the top 8, which would be cool to see, right? So there is a little bit of upside there with postponing the top 8, is that we get to see all of it potentially.
Having seen tournaments that work that way and played in tournaments that work that way, I hate it. I absolutely hate it.
Oh,
So
really?
I hope they don't do that. Yeah, it's just a miserable experience. They did that for like ETS Worlds, or was it ETS Worlds, or was it an invitational day too? I don't remember, but like it's just a miserable experience. I do not recommend it for any tournament organizer out there.
They do that for the top 4, I believe, for Eternal, where it's only. I guess for the top 8, it's a lot worse because you might have to wait 3 matches for your match to happen. But I don't think it for the top 4 where you only have to wait 1 match. So they almost certainly are going to do that for top 4 where if they do cast it, where they will watch all 2 top 4 matches. But I guess they might not do that for the top 8. Wait, so why don't you like watching it though? That's my question. I understand you hate playing in it, but watching it seems like a nice thing to watch each winning into Worlds match in the top 8,
It
right?
takes all day. I got things to do, people to see, places to go. Come on.
But I'm saying because of the way it was delayed, we have the time now, right? Like watching 4 matches is, about it. Like watching 7 matches is about as long as a regular ECQ takes, right? So because it was delayed, I'm saying there is this opportunity out there for the viewers.
I guess if people are so interested, but like me, I don't have the patience for that. All right. Thanks everyone for listening again. Good luck playing with the Awakening cards. Root on Stormblessed, and next week we'll have the Throne preview for you. Until next time, thanks for listening, and we'll see you in the friend zone. The Friends of Eternal Discord is the best place on the internet to get better at Eternal. We have players of all skill and experience levels all happy to help each other out on basically any aspect of their Eternal gameplay. And making all this possible is our generous patrons over at patreon.com. If you'd like to support FECast or Friends of Eternal, consider donating at patreon.com/Friends of Eternal. Thanks again for listening, and until next time, we'll see you in the friend zone.
It's fine. It's a podcast, whatever.
Show off those nerd biceps.